The first two episodes of Shogun were recently released, and as first episodes go, it's definitely up there. It provided solid foundations to a story which is centered around hunger for power and a battle between religions and leaders in 17th century Japan. One of the characters that we were introduced to was the Protestant Englishman called John Blackthorne. I found his situation to be extremely interesting, and it prompted me to look a bit deeper into the character and the real-life person that it was based on. The story of the real person which inspired John Blackthorne is a story that just doesn't sound like it could exist, and I thought I'd delve into it. So let's jump on in. Here is Shogun, John Blackthorne, the real story explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. So the character of John Blackthorne is actually based on a real person that's a part of history. This is William Adams, who was born in 1564 and died in May 1620 at the age of 55, which is nearly 20 years older than the average life expectancy at the time. He came from a shipbuilding, an astronomy and a navigation background in Gillingham before he eventually joined the Royal Navy, and whilst in the Navy he was in service during England's war with Spain against the Spanish Armada in 1588. 10 years later, in 1598, he went on an expedition to the Far East with a 5-ship fleet which was connected to the Dutch trade with India. The Dutch and English were allies at the time due to them both being Protestant countries and were both fighting against Spain. If we then go forward by 2 years, that then brings us to the timeline of where we were first introduced to John in the show. In the year 1600, after being at sea for over a year and a half, there were 23 men that were either sick or were dying, and they managed to anchor down off of an island called Kyushu in Japan. On board the ship, they had a variety of different goods, whether that be trade goods, tools, or weapons. For example, they had 19 cannon, which was referenced in the TV show, although it was rounded up to 20. However, they also had 5,000 cannonballs and several hundred muskets, so you can understand where the fear of a threat was coming from. Out of the 100 crew that originally set sail, 23 were sick or dying, but when they got to Japan, there were only 9 that actually survived when they arrived just off of Bungo. Like what was depicted in the show, there was a relatively hostile response towards the crew, and there were Japanese locals and Portuguese Jesuit missionary priests claiming that William and his crew were pirates and that they should be executed for that reason. The religious rivalry was something that was present between the Jesuit and other Catholic members and William. They took a natural distaste for William due to the fact that he was a Protestant, or at least they labelled him as that. As we know from history, the 30-Year War took place throughout Europe in the mid-1600s, and that same kind of mindset was present in this small encounter here on a more intimate scale. They felt like William was a threat to the hold that they were trying to get over the Japanese people and the development of Catholicism in Japan. They wanted to grow the Catholic Church there, but William was now somebody that was in their way. The remainder of the crew were held as prisoners in Osaka Castle, something which is different to the show, as they seem to just be kept where they were originally shipwrecked, rather than escorted to Osaka along with John, but that might change as the season goes on. William was taken to meet Tokugawa Ieyasu, the real person that Toranaga is based on. Ieyasu was the guardian of the son of the Taiko that had recently died, just like what we also saw in the first 2 episodes of the show where Toranaga was looking out for Ieyasu until he became of age to rule. It's said that Ieyasu met with William Adams on several occasions between the months of May and June in the year 1600 and was questioned about his extensive knowledge on ships, shipbuilding and navigation, something which was condensed into one conversation in the show. In a letter that the real William Adams wrote to his wife about when he met with Ieyasu, he said things like, "He viewed me well. He made many signs unto me, some of which I understood and some I did not. He demanded me of what land I was and what moved us to come to his land, being so far off. Then he asked whether our country had wars. I answered him, yeah, with the Spaniards and Portugals, but being in peace with all other nations. He asked me diverse other questions of things of religions and many other things, as what way we came to the country. Having a chart of the whole world, I showed him through the Strait of Magellan, and which he wondered and thought me to lie." So it showed that the conversation that we saw present in episode 2, where John was mapping out what he knew of the world, it was most likely drawn from the letter that William Adams actually wrote to his wife about when he sat down to meet with Ieyasu. William also said that Ieyasu denied the request for his execution because there were no reasonable grounds. The countries were not at war with each other, and William hadn't done any harm or damage to the land. So he ignored the Catholics claiming that he should be killed for being a pirate. The ship that William and the crew arrived on that was shipwrecked in Bungo was something which the Ieyasu ordered the crew to sell to Edo, where it didn't actually complete the journey due to it being in a condition beyond saving, so it inevitably sank in the waters. This is really where the first 2 episodes of the show concluded. Obviously not with us seeing the ship sinking or being sailed back, as we didn't see that. A few years later, William Adams was ordered to help build Japan's first Western-style ship, which was completed, and it was built to the size of being 80 tons. It was then the next year where Adams was tasked with building a larger ship, which was 120 tons. Something that wasn't that far off the size of the ship that William arrived on. With regards to the other survivors that William arrived in Japan with, many of them were allowed to leave Japan in the year 1605, and most of them chose to do so. This next part will have spoilers for what could be coming up in the show, so proceed with caution if you don't want to know what happened. After the Shogun had grown to trust William Adams, he eventually appointed him as a diplomatic and trade advisor, and he became his personal advisor for all things that were connected to the Western world. William Adams even became the official interpreter, showing that he learned the language, embraced the culture, and viewed the country completely differently to how he did when he first arrived. He would wear Japanese attire, and when other Englishmen later arrived, he preferred to be around the Japanese people. He was eventually given permission to enter the palace whenever he pleased and was able to speak with the Ieyasu as and when. Even though Tokugawa respected Adams, he didn't actually allow him to leave the country like many of the other crew members were given permission to do. Instead, for his loyalty, skills, knowledge and trust, he was given 2 swords, which meant that he had the authority of the samurai. This meant that William, as he was formerly known, was dead, and a samurai was born, making him known under a different identity. Even though William wasn't allowed to leave, he still sent payments to his wife Mary back home in England. With his new life and identity being in Japan, he did go on to marry somebody else whilst there, and he went on to have 2 children with them, a son and a daughter. In letters that William wrote, he mentioned how he respected and cared a lot for the people of Japan and their civilization. I imagine this is something that we're going to be seeing in the show. One of the first lines that the character John Blackthorne said when he arrived there was that he referred to them as savages. But I feel we're going to see that mindset change and he'll grow to respect them. Even in the couple of episodes that we've had, we've seen that mindset shift and a level of respect get formed. As well as the relationship building that William did with Tokugawa, he also contributed to the development and establishment of trading rights and passes which connected to other nations. So, as you can see, there are quite a lot of similarities in the true tale of William Adams, which inspired the fictional character of John Blackthorne. As well, William had a son named John, so I wonder if that's why they included the name of John in the fictional version of the character. It's interesting researching about the story after watching the first 2 episodes, because you can quite literally see it being told in a very similar way to how it was documented. I'm intrigued to see how deep they're going to go with John Blackthorne, as it seems as though the show is focusing on many different things, so it's going to be interesting for sure. So, there you have it, Shogun John Blackthorne, the real story explained. If you want to see more videos on Shogun, then click on the card in the top corner. I'll be covering the show every week, so be sure to come back for weekly breakdowns of the episode. My episode 1 and 2 breakdowns in the top corner right now. What did you think of the first 2 episodes of the show? Do you reckon it's going to live up to the hype that it's got? Let me know your thoughts in the comment below, and thanks for tuning into the video. I'll see you in the next one.